The late afternoon sun hung low over Phoenix, turning the resort courtyard into a wash of warm gold as guests filtered toward the ceremony space. Rebecca Whitmore stepped out of the rideshare slowly, one hand bracing her knee, the other holding the soft blue clutch she had used for the past 15 years. At 70, her movements were careful, deliberate, shaped by decades of work that had left small aches in her joints but an unmistakable steadiness in her posture. She paused for a moment at the entrance. Every string light, every flower arch, every shimmer of crystal along the walkway felt unreal. She had known the wedding would be big. Bianca Carver didn't believe in anything small, but the scale still surprised her. It reminded her of the life she'd never lived. The life she'd traded away the day she adopted Marcus and decided her own plans could wait, and then disappear entirely. For 45 years, everything had been about him. 2 jobs, graveyard shifts, second-hand clothes, a modest rental in Santa Fe that she kept spotless even when she returned home at 2 in the morning. A life built out of sacrifice where every dollar was stretched and every dream quietly folded away. Rebecca smoothed the front of her pale gray dress, simple, pressed, chosen with care. She had hoped, quietly, that today Marcus might notice the effort, that maybe he'd reach for her hand when she walked in, smile like the boy she once knew. But the moment she stepped into the courtyard, Bianca's voice sliced through the noise. "Oh, there you are," the bride said, eyes flicking up and down Rebecca's dress as if evaluating an inconvenience rather than a mother-in-law. "We weren't sure when you'd get here." Next to her, Evelyn Carver folded her manicured hands. The matriarch of the Carver family looked polished, radiant, entirely at home in the extravagant setting. "Marcus is busy with photos," she said lightly. "Why don't you head over to your table? It's right over there." She gestured vaguely toward the back, not even turning her head to confirm the direction. Rebecca followed the gesture and saw it immediately. A small round table placed near a service station where catering staff were moving trays of glasses. Far from the family tables crowded with framed pictures of Marcus growing up, college milestones, and smiling snapshots with Bianca. She didn't see a single photo that included her. A tiny sting pressed beneath her ribs, but she didn't say a word. She simply nodded and made her way toward the table, weaving through clusters of guests who glanced past her as though she were invisible. When she reached her seat, she discovered another detail. Only 2 chairs at the table, one for her, one unoccupied. It wasn't a family table. It wasn't even a friend's table. It was the spot for people who did not matter. Rebecca lowered herself into the chair slowly. She adjusted her napkin, folded her hands, and waited. No one approached. No one welcomed her. A passing server, barely older than 20, gave her the only smile she'd received since arrival. Guests nearby laughed loudly, lifting champagne flutes and snapping photos. Rebecca watched them quietly, feeling like she'd slipped into a celebration that did not belong to her, even though it centered on the child she had given her entire life to raise. Then the ceremony music began. She stood as everyone else stood. She watched her son, handsome in his tailored suit, face glowing with excitement, walk down the aisle and take Bianca's hands. There was love in his eyes, radiance, hope. None of it was directed at her. The officiant spoke warmly about family, perseverance, unity. Rebecca held her breath, letting the words pass through her like smoke. She reminded herself she was here to witness Marcus's happiness. That was all. But the true blow came later, during the reception, when Marcus took the microphone. "I want to thank the woman who shaped me," he said, voice ringing across the courtyard. Rebecca straightened instinctively, the breath catching in her chest, and then Marcus turned, not to her, but to Evelyn. "You've been my guide, my support, the woman who taught me integrity. Thank you, Mom." The courtyard erupted in applause. Rebecca's hands trembled beneath the tablecloth. Her throat tightened, but she made no sound. She didn't cry. She didn't stand. She didn't leave. She simply felt something inside her fall silent. As Marcus continued speaking, a new thought emerged within her. Sharp, clear, terrifying in its calm. Tonight will be the last time I allow him to hurt me. Rebecca lowered her gaze to her untouched glass of water and breathed in slowly. A lifetime of sacrifice had just met its quiet end. The morning after the wedding, Rebecca woke to the sound of her phone vibrating insistently on the nightstand in her Phoenix hotel room. For a moment she lay still, disoriented, the heavy curtains leaking only a thin line of desert light into the dark room. Her body ached from the previous day, the travel, the standing, the emotional weight that had pressed on her chest from the moment she stepped onto the resort grounds. The phone buzzed again. She reached for it and squinted at the screen. Bianca. For a heartbeat, she considered letting it go to voicemail. But habit, the same habit that had made her answer every late-night call from Marcus since he was a teenager, won out. She slid her thumb across the screen. "Hello," she said softly. "Rebecca." Bianca's voice came through, bright and sharp, as if nothing painful had occurred the day before. "We were just talking about the house numbers, and we realized we're going to be a bit short for the closing costs." Rebecca sat up slowly, pressing her back against the headboard. "The house numbers, the down payment, closing fees, some renovations," Bianca rattled off, as if reading from a checklist. "We'll need more than what you gave for the wedding. It's just how things are in Phoenix right now. Real estate is insane." Rebecca swallowed. "I already paid for the wedding," she said. "That was everything I promised." There was a pause, then a rustle, as if the phone had shifted hands. Marcus's voice came next, flat, edged with impatience. "Mom, look," he said. "Bianca and I crunched the numbers last night. We're going to need help with the house if we're going to start our life the right way." Rebecca closed her eyes. Images from the reception flashed through her mind. The distant table, the photos she wasn't in, the microphone in his hand as he thanked Evelyn for shaping him. Her stomach tightened. "I don't think I can give any more, Marcus," she replied quietly. "I've already given. If you loved me," he cut in, "you'd help us." The words hung there, heavy, ugly. Rebecca opened her eyes and stared at the pattern on the hotel bedspread. For decades, loving him had meant working overtime, skipping doctor's appointments, patching up her own life with second-hand solutions so he could have new opportunities. She wondered, not for the first time, if he ever truly understood that. "I do love you," she said, the words coming out thin but steady. "But I can't discuss this right now." There was a frustrated exhale on the other end. "Fine," Marcus said. "We'll talk later." The line went dead. Rebecca stared at the phone a few seconds longer, then set it down and sat in silence, listening to the blood pounding in her ears. The decision she'd felt taking shape the night before settled more firmly into place. Something was over. She wasn't sure yet exactly what, but she knew it with a clarity that made her hands stop shaking. 2 days later, she was back in Santa Fe. The small adobe house felt both familiar and foreign when she unlocked the front door. The air held the faint scent of old books and laundry detergent. Sunlight filtered in through the living room window, catching on framed pictures of Marcus as a boy, pictures she realized with a dull ache hadn't made it onto any of the display tables at the wedding. She hung her coat, set her small suitcase by the door, and walked straight past the living room, down the narrow hallway to her bedroom. Her steps knew where they were going before her mind fully caught up. In the corner of the room stood a modest wooden dresser, its surface bare except for a lamp and a faded jewelry dish. She knelt down slowly, joints protesting, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside, beneath a neatly folded sweater she never wore anymore, was a worn leather folder. She had placed it there years ago with the quiet intention of dealing with it later. Later had never come. Life Work, Marcus. There had always been something more urgent. Rebecca lifted the folder out carefully and set it on the bed. Her fingers lingered on the cover for a moment. Then she opened it. The first document was the deed to a small commercial property her late husband had owned on the outskirts of town, now leased to a local mechanic. Behind it were statements for high-yield certificates of deposit that had quietly rolled over and grown while she kept living as if nothing more than her monthly pension existed. Next came savings account records. Small deposits, $50 here, $100 there, stretched across decades. Evidence of nights she'd skipped eating out, skipped new clothes, skipped vacations, so there would always be something extra tucked away. And behind those, neatly copied and filed, were titles to 2 rental properties she'd inherited later and chosen not to talk about. Properties she'd managed quietly, letting the rent checks drift into an account Marcus never asked about. Page after page, number after number, the reality of her life assembled itself in front of her. She wasn't rich by the standards of people who threw weddings like the one in Phoenix, but she was far from the fragile, nearly broke woman the Carvers had clearly assumed she was. Marcus had never asked, not once, not about her finances, not about how she managed after his father died, not about whether the sacrifices had cost her more than money. He had needed, she had provided, and somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing her as a person at all. Rebecca closed the folder gently, then picked up her phone from the bedspread. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she hadn't dialed in years. Victor Ramirez, attorney. Her thumb hovered for a moment. Then she pressed the call button and lifted the phone to her ear. Victor? It's Rebecca Whitmore, she said when he answered. Her voice was calm in a way that surprised even her. I need to see you. It's urgent. Victor Ramirez's office sat just off the historic plaza in Santa Fe, a converted adobe building with thick walls and warm terracotta floors that held the desert's heat even in the coldest months. When Rebecca stepped inside, she felt an unexpected steadiness settle over her, as if the very structure recognized the weight of decisions made within its walls. The receptionist greeted her kindly and led her to Victor's office, where he stood from behind a wide wooden desk and offered a gentle smile. Rebecca, he said, taking her hand in both of his. It's been too long. Too long, she agreed softly. He gestured for her to sit. Rebecca lowered herself into the chair and placed the worn leather folder on his desk. She didn't rush. She didn't explain. She simply opened it and slid the documents toward him one by one. The deeds, the bank statements, the long-ignored CDs, the rental property titles. Victor's brows lifted slightly as he sorted them into neat piles. Is all of this active? He asked. All of it, she confirmed. Nothing encumbered. No debts attached. Victor nodded, doing the quick mental calculations that came naturally after decades in estate law. Rebecca, this is a substantial portfolio. She folded her hands in her lap. How substantial? He leaned back in his chair. With current market values, lease incomes, and the CD growth, about $1.4 to $1.5 million. Rebecca didn't react outwardly, though the number pressed against her chest with a faint, surreal heaviness. She had always known she was stable. She had never imagined the total. Victor watched her for a moment. Most people would be shocked. I suppose I lived small enough that I never had to think about it, she replied. He nodded. What would you like to do? Rebecca inhaled slowly, then spoke with a clarity that had not existed in her voice for years. I want to rewrite my will. Victor pulled out a fresh legal pad. All right. What are your wishes? First, she said calmly, Marcus is to be fully disinherited. No access to my accounts, no claim to my real estate, no authority over anything I leave behind. Victor's pen paused just briefly. His eyes lifted from the page, meeting hers. Rebecca, that's a serious step. I understand, she said quietly. Make a note that he is intentionally omitted. Victor resumed writing, his expression professional but touched with concern. And the estate? Where would you like it to go? I want to establish a charitable foundation, she said, for single adoptive mothers. Women who choose children the way I chose Marcus. Women who need help the way I once did. She exhaled slowly. The bulk of the estate should go to that foundation. He nodded. And the properties? All of them, she said. Transfer the titles to the foundation upon my passing. And restructure the rental agreements so nothing can revert to Marcus under any circumstances. Victor set down the pen. The room fell into a soft, contemplative quiet. Rebecca, he said gently, are you sure? She looked past him for a moment, out the small window where thin winter sunlight slanted across the plaza, illuminating the adobe buildings in warm gold. For the first time since the wedding, the pressure behind her ribs loosened, not because her heart was light, but because her direction was clear. When she met Victor's gaze again, her voice held no tremor. For the first time in my life, she answered, yes, I'm sure. Victor nodded slowly, accepting the weight of her decision. Then I'll prepare the documents today. You can sign by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, she said. They shook hands, and Rebecca left the office with the same calm she had brought in, except now it was stronger, anchored, resolute. On the walk back to her car, she pulled out her phone and contacted a moving company. Her voice was steady as she arranged for a full house clearing, furniture storage, and packing services. By the time she hung up, the decision was final. Rebecca Whitmore would not be living in Santa Fe much longer. Rebecca had been living in the Scottsdale penthouse for barely a week when the building concierge phoned her unit. His tone was polite, puzzled. Ms. Whitmore? 3 guests are insisting they're family. They say it's urgent. Rebecca closed the book on her lap and slipped her reading glasses onto the coffee table. She already knew who it was before he said their names. Send them up, she replied calmly. A soft chime signaled the private elevator's arrival. The door slid open, revealing Marcus, Bianca, and Evelyn stepping into the foyer of the penthouse as if they had stumbled into another universe. Marcus's eyes widened first. Bianca's jaw parted in disbelief. Evelyn, usually composed, elegant, surgically smooth, visibly blanched. The space around them didn't match the image they'd always held of Rebecca, the modest Santa Fe house, the worn sweaters, the careful coupons tucked in her purse. Here, everything gleamed. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped the living room in a panoramic sweep of desert sky and Camelback Mountain. Sunlight washed across the marble floors. A modern sectional curved around a stone fireplace. Abstract art, real, valuable pieces hung on the walls. Mom, Marcus breathed, almost choking on the word. What is this? Rebecca didn't rise to greet them. She sat in one of the white leather armchairs, posture impeccable, hands folded over one knee. The late afternoon light outlined her silver hair like a crown. Not the fragile grandmother they expected, but a woman who suddenly fit the room around her. This, she said simply, is my home. Bianca drifted forward slowly, her eyes darting over the quartz counters, the designer light fixtures, the discreet but unmistakably high-end appliances. Is this, she swallowed, is this rented? No, Rebecca replied. It's mine. Evelyn recovered enough to speak. Rebecca, forgive me, but how? These units cost $1.8 million, Marcus snapped, cutting her off. At least. Mom, where did this money come from? Rebecca stood, moving unhurriedly to the sleek dining table, where a leather portfolio sat waiting. She had prepared for this moment with a clarity she had never granted herself before. I expected questions, she said, opening the folder. Let me answer them. She spread out the documents the way Victor had shown her. Property deeds, bank statements, decades of CD growth, rental income summaries, and proof of her late husband's commercial assets. Bianca stared as if they were written in another language. Evelyn's lips tightened. Marcus's face went red, then pale, then red again. "You've had all this," he demanded, his voice cracking. "All this time? You had money, real money, and you let us struggle? You let us think." "I didn't let you think anything," Rebecca replied evenly. "You assumed." She tapped one document gently. "This property has been earning rental income since before you were in high school." Another tap. "The CDs matured and rolled over every year for 30 years. Another. "Your father's commercial building never stopped generating revenue." Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. He looked almost dizzy. "So you hid this?" Bianca pressed, her voice sharp with accusation and envy. Rebecca turned to her slowly. "I lived modestly. That is not the same thing as hiding." Evelyn stepped forward, expression stiff. "We could have helped you manage this. You should have told Marcus. Families are supposed to share." Rebecca met her gaze with a calm so cold it silenced Evelyn instantly. "Evelyn," she said, "you have never asked a single question about my life. You've never wondered how I paid bills, or whether I was comfortable, or whether I had anything at all. You only assumed I had nothing." The older woman stepped back. Marcus rubbed a hand across his face. "I'm your son," he muttered. "I'm supposed to know these things." "Supposed to," Rebecca agreed, "and yet you never asked. Not once." The space between them filled with a thick, uncomfortable quiet. Rebecca's tone remained clinical, precise, factual, stripped of the softness she'd carried for 70 years. The maternal warmth Marcus had grown up taking for granted was gone now, replaced by something he didn't recognize. "I don't know explanations," she said, "but I'm giving them anyway because this will be the last time I discuss my finances." The statement hung in the air, sharp and final. Marcus looked at the documents again. Proof of a life he'd never bothered to understand, and for the first time, embarrassment overtook his anger. Rebecca watched him without blinking. The reckoning had begun, and she didn't have to raise her voice for any of them to feel it. Rebecca didn't rush. She let the silence settle, let the view behind her, golden light spilling over Camelback Mountain, frame the moment with a quiet gravity none of them seemed prepared for. Then she turned back to the dining table and drew a second folder toward her. This one was thicker, heavier. "Since you're all here," she said, "there's something else you should see." Bianca stiffened. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Marcus looked as if he might be sick. Rebecca opened the folder and slid a set of notarized documents into the center of the table. The bold heading at the top of the first page caught their eyes immediately. "Last Will and Testament of Rebecca Whitmore Bianca" made a soft, strangled sound. "Wait, why would you bring this out now? We're just talking." "You don't have to." Rebecca's voice was calm. "You asked about my finances. This is part of it." Evelyn reached for a chair and eased herself down, smoothing her blouse with trembling hands. "Rebecca, dear, wills can be emotional decisions. You don't need to involve legal paperwork in a family misunderstanding." "It isn't a misunderstanding," Rebecca replied. Marcus stepped forward. His expression was tight, fearful. "Mom, what did you do?" She placed a gentle hand on the stack of pages. "This will reflect my final decisions. They're already signed, witnessed, filed." Bianca moved around the table, her eyes scanning the first page, then the second. Her breath hitched when she reached the inheritance clauses. "There's nothing here for Marcus," she whispered. "Correct," Rebecca said softly. Evelyn inhaled sharply. "Rebecca, sweetheart, disinheriting your only child. Surely you didn't mean to." "I meant every word," Rebecca said. Marcus took the papers from Bianca's trembling hands and flipped through them with frantic movements. Each page reinforced the same truth. He had been intentionally, explicitly left out. Everything, every property, every account, every asset, had been directed elsewhere. He swallowed hard. You took me out of your will. Yes. But why? His voice cracked. Why now? Rebecca held his gaze without looking away, without softening. Because, Marcus, you made something very clear to me at the wedding. You stood in front of 100 people and thanked another woman for raising you. You said I wasn't your real family. He flinched, as if struck. Bianca looked between them, stunned into silence. Evelyn's lips parted, as if to protest. But Rebecca continued before she could speak. I'm simply respecting your words. Marcus dropped the papers. They scattered across the marble like fallen leaves. Mom, no. That's not what I meant, he said, stumbling closer. His voice was desperate now, raw. I was nervous. It was a long day. Evelyn wrote part of that speech. I didn't, his breath hitched. I didn't mean to hurt you. You weren't nervous, Rebecca said quietly. You were sincere. He shook his head violently. I'm sorry. I swear I am. I'll make it up to you. We'll spend more time together. We can talk, really talk. His voice dropped into a near whisper. Just, please don't do this. Rebecca's face softened only at the edges, a human reaction, not a reversal. Marcus, I listened to your apology, but it doesn't change the truth. You didn't come here today because you wanted me. You came because you wanted my money. Marcus's eyes filled, and he sank into a nearby chair, his hands covering his face. A thin, broken sound escaped him, a sound she had heard only once, when he was a child and realized his father wasn't coming home. But Rebecca didn't move toward him. She didn't kneel, didn't reach for him, didn't fold him into her arms. That part of her had already been laid to rest. Bianca stood rigid, stunned. Evelyn looked away, jaw clenched. Marcus lifted his head, eyes red. Mom, please, undo it. Change it back. Don't let this be final. Rebecca exhaled with a quiet steadiness that filled the entire room. It is final, she said. I will not undo the will. Her voice was gentle. Her resolve was absolute. And Marcus understood, truly understood, that something irreversible had happened. The following week, Scottsdale's upscale shopping district shimmered under the bright Arizona sun. Glass storefronts reflected luxury, boutique clothing houses, high-end galleries, and jewelry stores where the salespeople greeted customers by name. Rebecca walked along the promenade with a calm, unhurried step, her linen blouse fluttering lightly in the warm breeze. She paused at Marston Jewelers, drawn by a necklace displayed under a spotlight, white gold, hand-set diamonds, graceful and understated, a piece for a woman who knew the value of quiet beauty. Inside, a jeweler in a tailored suit greeted her. Good afternoon, Ms. Whitmore. Back to try it on. Rebecca smiled softly. Yes, I think today is the day. The necklace was brought out with reverence. When the clasp clicked into place behind her neck, the mirror reflected something she hadn't seen in decades. Not wealth, not extravagance, but a woman reclaiming the right to feel worthy. I'll take it, she said. Of course, the jeweler replied. 55,000. Even. She handed over her card without hesitation. As the transaction processed, the bell above the door chimed. Bianca's voice floated in first, high-clipped. Are you sure this is the right store, Evelyn? That girl online said she, and then silence. Rebecca turned just enough to see their faces as they froze in the doorway. Bianca's eyes widened, bouncing from the glass cases to the velvet-lined boxes, then landing squarely on the necklace around Rebecca's throat. A flush crept over her cheeks. Evelyn looked even worse, shoulders tightening, fingers twitching as if she needed something to hold onto. The jeweler returned with the receipt. Here you are, Ms. Whitmore, and thank you again for choosing us. The words seemed to echo. Bianca swallowed. Hard. Rebecca offered the jeweler a polite nod and took the small bag containing the certificate and case. She turned to walk out, but Evelyn stepped forward, blocking her path. "Rebecca," she said, her voice suddenly thin, almost shaking. "Could we talk for a moment?" Rebecca's expression didn't change. "About what?" Evelyn clasped her hands together, forcing a smile. "We misunderstood. Truly. People say things they don't mean when they're overwhelmed. You have to believe we're sorry." Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly. "Sorry for what?" "For—" Evelyn hesitated, glancing toward Bianca. "For not treating you better." Bianca lifted her chin, but her voice wavered. "We didn't know you were," she caught herself. "We didn't know you had so much responsibility, so much going on." Rebecca let a quiet breath escape, almost a sigh. "You want a second chance," she said. "Not a question." Evelyn's shoulders sagged in relief. Yes, exactly." Rebecca's reply was soft, steady, and devastating in its plain truth. "When you thought I was poor," she said, "you never showed kindness. Don't pretend now." The words seemed to drain the air from the room. Evelyn's mouth opened, then closed. Bianca flushed crimson, her eyes darting anywhere but toward Rebecca. No one spoke. No apology dared follow. Rebecca stepped past them with quiet poise, the elevator doors sliding open as she approached. The cool air inside wrapped around her like a fresh start. Outside, the district's fountain trickled softly, luxury storefronts casting reflections across polished stone walkways. She slipped her sunglasses on, lifted her chin, and continued down the promenade without a backward glance. Behind her, Bianca and Evelyn remained frozen in the jewelry store's doorway, humiliated, powerless, and finally aware of what they had lost. Rebecca walked on, the diamonds at her throat catching the sunlight as she embraced a new, peaceful independence she should have claimed long ago. Marcus had always been a man of routines, morning gym sessions, color-coded calendars, perfectly pressed shirts lined up in order of shade. But after the confrontation at the Scottsdale penthouse, his carefully constructed life began to unravel thread by thread. Sleep was the first thing to leave him. Night after night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling while Bianca slept beside him, her steady breathing a contrast to the chaos in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the look on Rebecca's face, not angry, not shouting, simply resolved. A look that told him she had already moved somewhere he could no longer reach. By the third week, exhaustion carved shadows beneath his eyes. He missed deadlines at work, stumbled through presentations, snapped at colleagues who had never seen him lose control of anything. His supervisor pulled him aside, concerned. Marcus brushed it off. But the truth was plain, he was slipping. At home, the tension was suffocating. Bianca blamed him for the lost inheritance, though she tried and failed to mask her resentment. Their arguments grew sharper, colder. Plates clattered harder when she set the table. Doors closed a little too firmly behind him. She insisted they fix things with Rebecca, but every attempt had been met with the same quiet, immovable refusal. Even Evelyn kept her distance now, her advice clipped and strategic rather than maternal. Marcus felt something fracture under the pressure. He was losing control of the narrative, losing the family image he had curated so carefully. One night, after pacing the living room for hours, Marcus sat down on the couch, pulled out his phone, and opened the camera. His face stared back at him, hollow, strained. No trace of the confident groom from the wedding reception. He hit record. The words came out in broken fragments at first, then spilled faster as weeks of bottled emotion cracked open. He apologized to Rebecca. He admitted that he had taken her for granted. He spoke about the years she had raised him alone, the sacrifices he never bothered to understand. His voice wavered, then broke completely. The video lasted 5 minutes. When he finished, he didn't watch it back. He posted it to all his social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn, with a caption that read simply, "Mom, I'm sorry." Then he set the phone down and covered his face with both hands. By morning, the video had gone viral. Hundreds of comments turned into thousands. Strangers analyzed every second of his voice cracks, every flicker of regret in his expression. Your mom deserved better. Money didn't ruin your family. Entitlement did. You thanked another woman at your wedding and expected forgiveness. Rebecca sounds like an angel. Leave her alone. Countless people, old, young men, women, shared stories of parents they had taken for granted, parents they had lost too soon. The internet had chosen a side, and it wasn't his. News outlets picked it up. TikTok creators dissected the situation. One family therapist stitched the video and explained in a calm, clinical tone why adult children often fail to appreciate the silent labor of single mothers. Bianca was humiliated. She begged Marcus to take the video down. But it was too late. The moment had taken on a life of its own. Across the digital noise, one person remained quiet. Rebecca. She lived her days in peaceful rhythm at the Scottsdale penthouse. Morning walks, coffee by the window, evenings watching the desert sky shift colors. When the video reached her phone, she saw Marcus's name and paused only for a breath before pressing play. She watched him cry, watched him struggle to articulate remorse, watched the boy she raised, now a man drowning in consequences he created. Her face didn't change. The wound he spoke of was far older than the wedding, deeper than a single speech. It stretched across years of dismissiveness, years of believing her sacrifices were simply expected rather than extraordinary. When the video ended, the screen faded back to his desperate caption, "Mom, I'm sorry." Rebecca quietly tapped delete message. She did not respond, not out of cruelty, but because some wounds were not meant to be reopened, and some apologies, however public, came far too late. In the weeks after the apology video went viral, Marcus's life didn't simply unravel. It collapsed inward, piece by piece, as if the foundations he had relied on were suddenly made of sand. The first hit came from Bianca. Humiliation curdled into bitterness. She blamed him openly now, not just for the public embarrassment, but for the lost inheritance, the lost stability, the lost future she'd imagined for herself. Their arguments shifted from whispers behind closed doors to full-volume explosions neighbors could hear through the walls. One night, after a particularly brutal fight, Bianca packed a suitcase in the living room while Marcus begged her to stay. "You destroyed everything," she said, zipping the bag with a sharp pull. "You ruined our reputation. Your mother hates us, the internet hates us, and I'm done being tied to your mess." She walked out without looking back. Marcus stood in the doorway long after her car disappeared, his breath shaking in the cold desert air. The second hit landed days later. Evelyn's finances, once polished and pristine, began to crack. Her investments had been tied to a risky partnership she could no longer afford to maintain. Creditors called. She sold jewelry. She downsized. She whispered her troubles to Marcus in trembling, controlled tones, trying to keep up the facade of elegance, even as the ground shifted beneath her. The third hit was the most brutal. Marcus's firm quietly pulled several of his major accounts. Clients cited public instability, conflict of interest, and brand misalignment. The viral video had made him the face of entitlement and emotional recklessness. No one wanted to work with a man whose meltdown had become a nationwide talking point. By the end of the month, Marcus had lost nearly 40% of his income. That was when desperation finally drove them, Marcus, Bianca, and Evelyn together, to the one place they had vowed not to return to unless absolutely necessary. Rebecca's Scottsdale penthouse. The elevator chimed, and the three stepped out into the hallway like defeated shadows of their former selves. Marcus's shirt was wrinkled. Bianca's makeup was smudged. Evelyn looked older than Rebecca by a decade. Marcus knocked. Inside, Rebecca was arranging fresh flowers in a vase. She glanced toward the door, but didn't rush. She finished adjusting the last stem before walking over and opening it. The sight before her was almost unrecognizable. "Mom," Marcus breathed, voice small. "We need to talk." Bianca stepped forward quickly, eyes shining with practiced tears. "Rebecca, please. We made mistakes, but we're family. We can fix this." Evelyn clasped her hands in front of her chest. "Rebecca, dear, surely you understand what hardship feels like. We're going through so much. If you could just—" Rebecca raised a gentle hand, stopping her. "No anger, no cruelty, just quiet, steady boundaries. You're not here because you love me," she said softly. "You're here because you lost comfort." Bianca flinched. Marcus swallowed hard. "Mom, I know I hurt you, but I'm still your son." Rebecca's eyes rested on him with a sadness deeper than disappointment, something closer to acceptance. "You are my son," she said, "but that doesn't mean I'm required to let you keep hurting me." Marcus reached for the doorframe as if needing something solid to hold onto. "Please let us in. Just talk to us." Rebecca shook her head slowly. "I already said everything I needed to say." Her voice was quiet, final. She didn't slam the door. She didn't scold or swear or cry. She simply closed it softly between her past and her future. On the other side, the hallway fell silent as Marcus, Bianca, and Evelyn stood frozen, realizing the one truth none of them had ever imagined. Rebecca's forgiveness was not owed, and her freedom had no room left for them. Victor Ramirez greeted Rebecca with a warmth that came from respect, not pity. His office, sunlit, lined with shelves of casebooks and framed certificates, had become a quiet refuge during the storm of the past weeks. Rebecca arrived with a list in hand, every item neatly checked except the final few. "We're almost done," Victor said, guiding her to a chair. "Just a few final filings and confirmations." Rebecca handed him the paperwork she'd organized the night before: property transfers, bank instructions, foundation documents. She had spent a lifetime carrying weight in silence. Now she carried only clarity. As Victor reviewed each page, he nodded slowly. "Everything looks solid. The will is airtight. Rebecca, you made sure of that." "I needed to," she replied softly. He hesitated. "There's one more thing. Your son submitted an inquiry to the court last week." Rebecca didn't flinch. "He tried to contest it." Victor confirmed with a small, regretful sigh. "Yes, but the court dismissed it almost immediately. You followed every legal requirement. Your intentions were clear. The will stands." Rebecca folded her hands in her lap. No triumph warmed her expression, only a gentle, weary acceptance. "Thank you, Victor, for helping me do this the right way." He smiled. "You're finally taking care of yourself. That's all this is." Later that afternoon, back in her penthouse, she found an envelope slid under her door, her name written in Marcus's handwriting, shaky and uneven. She sat on the balcony, listening to the quiet hum of Scottsdale traffic below, and opened it carefully. It was long, pages of remorse, explanations, childhood memories, and desperate promises. Marcus wrote about fear, pride, pressure, the influence of others, his own blindness. He wrote about wishing he could undo everything said at the wedding, everything done afterward, everything he failed to see. Rebecca read every word. Then she folded the letter, smoothed the creases, and slipped it into a drawer beside a stack of old family photos. She didn't throw it away. She simply put it somewhere it could no longer wound her. 2 days later, she stood in the Scottsdale airport, her luggage beside her, a boarding pass to San Diego glowing on her phone screen. The ocean had always soothed her, the steady pull of waves, the salt in the air, the sense of horizon. She wanted that now. Needed it. Her phone rang. Marcus. For a moment, she let it vibrate, watching the screen pulse with his name. Then she answered. Mom. His voice was small, frayed. Are you really leaving? Yes. Marcus, she said gently. I am. I know you won't forgive me, he whispered. I know I ruined everything. But please, tell me something. Is this punishment? Rebecca looked toward the window, where planes taxied slowly under the sun. Her reflection stared back. Older, stronger, finally unburdened. This isn't punishment, she said. It's the consequence of how you treated me. Marcus inhaled sharply, as if the words cut and cleansed at the same time. I'm sorry, he whispered again. I know, she said softly. The gate agent announced boarding. Rebecca ended the call, slipped the phone into her purse, and gathered her things. She walked down the jet bridge with a steady gait, the cool air of the aircraft brushing her face as she stepped inside. She did not look back. 6 months after leaving Arizona behind, Rebecca's life had settled into a rhythm as gentle and steady as the tide outside her window. Her new condo in San Diego's Little Italy wasn't large, not compared to the Scottsdale penthouse, but it didn't need to be. It was airy and bright, with tall windows that framed the waterfront and narrow streets below, where cafes bustled from sunrise to sundown. Every morning, she walked to the Mercado Farmers Market, greeting vendors who had already begun to know her by name. She bought fresh basil, ripe tomatoes, small bundles of lavender. Sometimes she paused to listen to local musicians, their voices warm in the salt-tinged air. The California sun softened her shoulders, warmed the quiet corners of her heart she once believed permanently bruised. In the afternoons, she painted. She set up her easel by the window, where light pooled across the hardwood floor. She painted the harbor, the curve of fishing boats, the deep blues that shifted with the changing sky. She painted women she had once been, tired, hopeful, determined. She painted without worrying if the work was good or if anyone would ever see it. The act alone was enough. Twice a week, she volunteered at a support center for single mothers, helping them navigate paperwork, housing applications, and childcare referrals. Some arrived shaken after leaving abusive households. Others were simply exhausted from juggling too much alone. Rebecca listened to them the way no one had listened to her when she was young and frightened and raising Marcus after her husband's death. You're not alone, she told them, and she meant it. Her foundation, quietly launched through Victor's help, was flourishing. Grants had already been issued. A young mother in Tucson used the funds to finalize an adoption she'd feared she couldn't afford. Another in Sacramento secured safe housing for herself and her newborn. Rebecca received letters from program directors and social workers, all thanking her for what she had built, for the lifeline she had chosen to extend to strangers. It was the first time in decades she felt her life expanding instead of shrinking. Occasionally, mail arrived from Arizona. Marcus wrote every few weeks, letters filled with more honesty than he had ever offered in person. He described therapy sessions, rebuilding his career, confronting parts of himself he had spent years ignoring. He wrote about missing her, about wishing he could go back, about hoping she was healthy and safe. Rebecca read the first few letters, the ink smudged in places where he had pressed too hard. She cried once, quietly, with her hand over her mouth. But as the months passed, the letters became something else. Echoes of a past she was no longer carrying. She didn't destroy them. She placed them gently in a drawer in her bedroom, stacked neatly beside the older letters he had written years before. The most recent one, arriving just 3 days earlier, remained unopened. The envelope lay on top of the stack, its flap unbroken, its weight feather light. One evening, as the sun melted into the Pacific, Rebecca stepped onto her balcony. The breeze lifted her hair, carrying the scent of ocean salt and warm pavement. Below, Little Italy's lights flickered on one by one, threading gold through the twilight. She wrapped her hands around a cup of tea and leaned against the railing. Her heart felt light, not because life had been perfect, not because pain had vanished, but because she had finally chosen herself, chosen peace, chosen a future not defined by apology or guilt or sacrifice. She watched the last edge of the sun disappear beneath the horizon, a soft glow lingering in the sky. Her victory was not loud. It was not vengeful. It was quiet, dignified, and entirely her own.